Ezekiel Chapter 40. In the 25th year of our captivity, at the beginning of the year, on the 10th day of the month, in the 14th year after the city was struck down, on that same day the hand of Jehovah was upon me, and he brought me there. In the visions of God he brought me into the land of Israel and set me down upon a very high mountain, and on it to the south there was a structure like a city. And he brought me there, and there was a man, whose appearance was like the appearance of bronze with a line of flax and a measuring reed in his hand, standing in the gate. And the man said to me, Son of man, look with your eyes, and hear with your ears, and set your heart on all that I show you, because for this purpose you have been brought here that it may be shown to you. Tell all that you see to the house of Israel. Now there was a wall, all around the outside of the house, and in the man's hand a measuring reed 6 cubits long, each cubit a cubit and a handbreadth. So he measured the thickness of the structure, 1 reed, and the height, 1 reed. Then he came to the gate which faces toward the east and went up its steps, and he measured the threshold of the gate, 1 reed deep, and each threshold was 1 reed deep. And every guardroom was 1 reed long and 1 reed wide, and the space between the guardrooms was 5 cubits, and the threshold of the gate by the porch of the gate toward the house was 1 reed. He measured also the porch of the gate toward the house, 1 reed. Then he measured the porch of the gate, 8 cubits, and its posts, 2 cubits, and the porch of the gate was toward the house. And there were 3 guardrooms on one side and 3 on the other side of the gate which was facing east, and the 3 of them had the same measurement, and the posts had the same measurement on both sides. And he measured the width of the entrance of the gate, 10 cubits, and the total length of the gate, 13 cubits. And there was a border before the guardrooms, 1 cubit on this side, and a border, 1 cubit on that side, and the guardrooms, 6 cubits on this side, and 6 cubits on that side. And he measured the total gate width from the roof edge of one guardroom to the roof edge of the other, 25 cubits. The entrances of the guardrooms were opposite each other. He also made a measurement of the posts, 60 cubits in all, and the gate surrounded a court which reached to the posts. And the distance from the front of the gate at the entrance to the front of the inner porch of the gate was 50 cubits. And the guardrooms and their posts had latticed windows within and all around the gate. The porches also had windows within and all around, and palm trees were on each post. Then he brought me into the outer court, and there were chambers and a pavement made for the court all around, 30 chambers were upon the pavement. And the pavement flanked the gates, its width equal to the length of the gates, that is, the lower pavement. Then he measured the distance from the front of the lower gate to the front of the outside of the inner court gate, 100 cubits, both on the east and on the north. Then he measured the gate of the outer court which faced toward the north, its length and its width. And it had 3 guardrooms on this side and 3 on that side. And its posts and its porch were of the same measurement as the first gate, its length was 50 cubits, and the width 25 cubits. And its windows and its porch and its palm trees were of the same measurement as the gate which faced toward the east, and 7 steps led up to it, and its porch was in front of them. And there was a gate to the inner court opposite the outer gate, both on the north and on the east. And he measured the distance from gate to gate, 100 cubits. And he led me toward the south, and there was a gate toward the south, and he measured its posts and its porch according to those same measurements. And the gate and its porch had windows all around just like those other windows, the length was 50 cubits, and the width 25 cubits. And there were 7 steps going up to it, and its porch was in front of them, and it had palm trees upon its posts, 1 on each side. And there was a gate to the inner court toward the south, and he measured the distance from gate to gate toward the south, 100 cubits. Then he brought me into the inner court through the south gate, and he measured the south gate according to those same measurements. And its guardrooms and its posts and its porches according to those same measurements, and it had windows in and around it and its porches, the length was 50 cubits, and the width 25 cubits. And there were porches all around, 25 cubits long and 5 cubits wide. And its porches were toward the outer court, and palm trees were upon its posts, and its steps had 8 steps. And he brought me into the inner court toward the east, and he measured the gate according to those same measurements. And its guardrooms and its posts and its porches according to those same measurements, and it had windows in and around it and its porches, the length was 50 cubits, and the width 25 cubits. And its porches were toward the outer court, and palm trees were upon its posts on each side, and its steps had 8 steps. And he brought me to the north gate, and he measured it according to those same measurements. Its guardrooms, its posts, and its porches, and it had windows in and around it, the length was 50 cubits, and the width 25 cubits. And its porches were toward the outer court, and palm trees were upon its posts, on each side, and its steps had 8 steps. And a chamber with its entrance was by the posts at the gates, there they washed the burnt offering. And in the porch of the gate were 2 tables on this side and 2 tables on that side on which to slay the burnt offering, the sin offering, and the trespass offering. And on one side outside, as one goes up to the entrance of the gate toward the north, were 2 tables, and on the other side, which belonged to the porch of the gate, were 2 tables. 4 tables were on this side and 4 tables on that side beside the gate, 8 tables on which they slaughtered the sacrifices. And there were 4 tables for the burnt offering, made of hewn stone, 1.5 cubits long and 1.5 cubits wide and 1 cubit high, on which they laid the instruments with which they slaughtered the burnt offering and the sacrifice. And double hooks, 1 handbreadth long, were fastened on the inside all around. And upon the tables was the flesh of the offering. And outside the inner gate in the inner court were 2 chambers, one at the side of the north gate facing toward the south, one at the side of the south gate facing toward the north. And he said to me, This chamber that faces toward the south is for the priests, the keepers of the charge of the house. And the chamber that faces toward the north is for the priests, the keepers of the charge of the altar. These are the sons of Zadok, who come near to Jehovah to minister to him from among the sons of Levi. And he measured the court, a square, 100 cubits long and 100 cubits wide, and the altar was in front of the house. Then he brought me to the porch of the house and measured each post of the porch, 5 cubits on this side and 5 cubits on that side, and the width of the gate was 14 cubits, including the side indents in the gate, 3 cubits on this side and 3 cubits on that side. The length of the porch was 20 cubits and the width 12 cubits, and 10 steps led up to it, and there were pillars by the posts, one on this side and another on that side. Ezekiel Chapter 41. And he brought me to the temple and measured the posts, 6 cubits wide on one side and 6 cubits wide on the other side was the width of the post. And the width of the entrance was 10 cubits, and the sides of the entrance were 5 cubits on one side and 5 cubits on the other side. And he measured its length, 40 cubits, and the width, 20 cubits. Then he went into the inner temple and measured each post of the entrance, 2 cubits, and the entrance, 6 cubits, and the width beside the entrance, 7 cubits. And he measured its length, 20 cubits, and the width, 20 cubits, before the outer temple, and he said to me, This is the Holy of Holies. Then he measured the wall of the house, 6 cubits thick, and the width of every side chamber, 4 cubits, all around the house on every side. And the side chambers were in 3 stories, one over another, with 30 units in each story, and they extended to the wall, which the house had for the side chambers all around to be supports, so that there would not be supports inserted into the wall of the house. And the side chambers that went around the house became wider as they went up by stories. Because the surrounding of the house increased upward around the house, therefore the house had width upward, and so one went up from the lowest story to the highest through the middle story. I also saw that the house had a raised platform all around, the foundations of the side chambers were a full reed of 6 long cubits. The thickness of the outer wall of the side chambers was 5 cubits, and space that was left alongside the side chambers belonged to the house. And between the chambers and the house was a width of 20 cubits all around the house on every side. And the entrances of the side chambers were toward the space that was left, one entrance toward the north and another entrance toward the south, and the width of the place that was left was 5 cubits all around. And the building that was in front of the separate place at the side toward the west was 70 cubits wide, and the wall of the building was 5 cubits thick all around, and its length 90 cubits. So he measured the house, 100 cubits long, and the separate place at the back and the building with its walls, 100 cubits long. And the width of the front of the house and of the separate place toward the east, 100 cubits. And he measured the length of the building before the separate place, which was behind it, and its galleries on one side and on the other side, 100 cubits. And the outer temple, the inner temple, the porches of the court, the thresholds, the latticed windows, and the galleries of the surrounding side chambers with their 3 stories, opposite the threshold, were paneled with wood all around, even from the ground to the windows. Now the windows were latticed to the top of the entrance, both in the inner house and outside. And on all the walls all around inside and outside, by measurement, were both carved cherubim and palm trees. And a palm tree was between 2 cherubim, and every cherub had 2 faces. So there was the face of a man toward the palm tree on one side and the face of a lion toward the palm tree on the other side. So it was carved in and around the whole house. From the ground to the top of the entrance cherubim and palm trees were carved, even on the wall of the temple. The temple doorposts were squared. And at the front of the sanctuary was something in appearance like the appearance of a wooden altar, 3 cubits high, and its length 2 cubits, and its corners, its length, and its walls were made of wood. And he said to me, This is the table that is before Jehovah. Now the temple and the sanctuary had double doors. And the double doors had 2 swinging leaves, 2 leaves for one door and 2 leaves for the other. And carved on these, on the doors of the temple, were cherubim and palm trees, just like those carved on the walls. And there was a threshold of wood upon the front of the porch outside. And there were latticed windows and palm trees on either side, on the sides of the porch, the side chambers of the house, and the thresholds. Ezekiel Chapter 42. Then he brought me out into the outer court the way toward the north, and he brought me into the chamber that was adjacent to the separate place and which was adjacent to the building toward the north. The length of the side of the northern entrance was 100 cubits, and the width was 50 cubits. Adjacent to the 20-cubit space of the inner court and adjacent to the pavement of the outer court was one gallery on top of another gallery in 3 stories. And before the chambers on the inside was a walkway of 10 cubits width, a way of 100 cubits, and their entrances were toward the north. Now the upper chambers were narrower, for the galleries took more space away from these than from the lower and the middle stories in the building. For they were arranged in 3 stories, and they did not have pillars like the pillars of the courts, therefore the upper story was set back from the ground more than the lower and middle stories. There was also an outside wall beside the chambers, toward the outer court in front of the chambers, its length was 50 cubits. For the length of the chambers that were in the outer court was 50 cubits, while those facing the temple were 100 cubits. And at the foot of these chambers was an entrance on the east side to enter them from the outer court. By the breadth of the wall of the court to the south, beside the separate place and beside the building, there were chambers, with a way before them. Their appearance was like the appearance of the chambers which were toward the north, just as their length, so also was their width, and all their exits were according to both their arrangements and their entrances. So the entrances of the chambers that were toward the south were entered through an entrance toward the east at the head of the corresponding way, directly beside the wall. Then he said to me, The north chambers and the south chambers which are beside the separate place are holy chambers, where the priests who are near to Jehovah shall eat the most holy things. There they put down the most holy things, the meal offering, the sin offering, and the trespass offering, for the place is holy. When the priests enter, they shall not go out of the holy place into the outer court, but they shall put down their garments in which they have ministered there, because they are holy. And they shall put on other garments and approach the area designated for the people. Now when he had finished measuring the inner house, he brought me out through the gate which faces toward the east and measured it all around. He measured on the east side with the measuring reed 500 reeds, with the measuring reed all around. He measured on the north side 500 reeds with the measuring reed all around. He measured on the south side 500 reeds with the measuring reed. He turned to the west side and measured 500 reeds with the measuring reed. He measured it on 4 sides. It had a wall all around, the length 500 cubits and the width 500 cubits, to make a separation between what was holy and what was common.